Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions, 4 p.m. BST on a Tuesday afternoon. Back in the chair is James. He's back in from last week. Last week we were talking, what were we talking about last week? We were talking about the velocity, wasn't it?
Restock limits and
restock limits, yeah, demystifying the restock limits. But this week we're going to be talking about hacks that you can do in terms of working with 3PL, the in preparation, opportunity costs, and all those kind of things. But before we get into it, do you want to get the audience, give them a little bit of background on yourself, and explain who you are?
Absolutely. Been in e-commerce for at this point over a decade. Been on Amazon since 2017. We opened a 3PL in 2020 in response to some of the at this point over
yeah, sorry, apologies. Let me turn that off. Yeah, carry on.
In response to some of the kind of obviously market changes in the logistics side, and one, I needed prep, but I also wanted to solve a lot of the market issues. So kind of doing both now, but I am quite analytical, so it's allowed me to say, hey, I can service my customers rather than just being a warehouse or just being a prep center. We can kind of blend a lot of the unique aspects of the logistics, the warehousing, even a little bit on the import side. So it provides a lot of additional, not necessarily services that like cost money, but just value adds and stuff like that, how we can help our clients.
Great. Cool. Let's get straight into it then. You got a long list there. Let's just start from the top. Where do you want to go with this first?
Absolutely. So I'll start off with this. So obviously I have a 3PL and I've used many 3PLs, but you also have to ask yourself in this business, whether you're private label, wholesale, arbitrage, it doesn't really matter. What business do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the business of product development? Do you want to be in the business of sourcing? Do you want to be in the warehousing business? If you want to be in the warehousing business, I encourage you to get a warehouse because you'll learn a lot. You'll have some additional flexibility. But for those that don't want to be in warehousing, this is kind of something to think about, saying, hey, a warehouse may be necessary, but it may not need to be your warehouse. So just ask yourself, what business do you want to be in? And then that can kind of direct your business and say, hey, what advantages or disadvantages through that path. A couple things that kind of apply to everyone. I would say little things can make a big difference. I kind of joke with my team and saying, hey, if we can cut off 1 second off of every product, it doesn't seem like much, but multiplied by 100,000 products, that's a lot of time. So things like using 30-up labels versus label printers. Sometimes 30-ups make sense, but a lot of times if you're printing 5 of a label, you're going to waste a whole sheet. You got more time, you get more setup. Sometimes a label printer makes sense. Same goes for software. A lot of people use Seller Central. Works perfectly fine. But there are software systems out there that are either very inexpensive or probably already integrate with some of the tools you already use, and saying, hey, maybe this software can create a shipment better. So think about ways that, hey, it may cost you $100 or $150 for a label printer, but how fast can that pay for itself?
Just going back again, the shipping, talking about shipping and shipping plans, you mentioned as well last week, anyone out there that has got a history of unprocessed shipping plans, get rid of them now because they're counting against you in terms of calculations of your restock limits.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of keeping your whole account lean and clean. So saying, hey, I got old stuff from 2 years ago. I'm never planning to restock. Probably delete it because of hijackers. And by the way, hijackers are not exclusive to private label. They're everywhere. They'll hijack wholesale listings. They'll hijack basically anything. IP claims. Hey, if someone changes the brand and files an IP claim, I'm like, I haven't sold that in 2 years. Why are you filing an IP claim? So just keep your inventory lean. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize, USPS, UPS, and FedEx, while they all are different, they all have different resources for free shipping supplies. So if you're shipping via UPS a lot, you may want to look into what shipping supplies make sense. Now, are you going to use all of their different supplies? No. I wouldn't abuse them either. But for some of us that we're shipping UPS parcels, like their labels, if you're using UPS, it makes sense. So UPS, FedEx, USPS, look into them. See, hey, whether you're doing fulfillment, whether you're doing FBA, whether you're doing other stuff, just think about some of the options out there, because that can not only save you money, but it's saying, hey, I don't have to worry about shopping for this every time I need more. And then I guess the most important part to transition us to kind of the more 3PL side of things is focus on growing your business, not like try to move yourself out of the nitty gritty details sometimes, whether it's staff, VAs, outsourcing, etc. Sometimes it makes sense to insource stuff and do it yourself. But other times it may actually make sense to outsource it. I had a friend of mine, I won't tell his name, but his story is generic enough that I think it's a great example. He processes inventory actually quite faster than us because he has some advanced equipment. But due to his overhead, such as his warehouse, insurance, employees, all the other variables that are at play, his prep costs are actually similar to our published prep rates. So while it may not make sense for every product, he's actually has a warehouse and is considering, hey, where does a 3PL make sense? These products are dragging us down. I don't mind paying 10 cents more, 20 cents more, or whatever, because ultimately his per unit cost is not, oh, I can prep 100 units an hour and I pay my employees, I don't know, $15 an hour. Guess what? That $15 doesn't include workman's comp insurance, your building utilities, your rent, your other taxes related to your employees, any benefits. So you could be looking at way more than $15 an hour. And that's when you need to evaluate, when do certain things make sense? And to transition us to kind of a 3PL conversation is saying, okay, there's a lot out there. I get that. There's professional 3PLs. There's, I would say, unprofessional ones. There's ones that track everything on paper. There's ones that track everything in proprietary systems, and there's everything in between. But what you're going to really want to look for is saying, hey, what economies of scale could I benefit that they're sending out truckloads a week or whatever it is that I could never do, but where's that savings passed on to me? And saying, hey, for example, one of the opportunities that we have is we book our own freight. So while the client may have one pallet, we now combine that pallet with another client's 4 pallets, another client's 6 pallets, etc. Now we got 20 pallets on a truck or more. And one, we're booking our own freight. It's certainly something to look into. I encourage everyone to at least consider it, because let's say partnered carrier takes 2 weeks to check in, not out of transfer, but just check into Amazon, and it costs you $150 for a particular shipment. We're talking LTL here. Small parcel, a little bit different. However, what if you spent $300 and it checked in 2 days or 1 day or the same day? Now you have to hold like a week and a half less of inventory. Is that worth that extra $150? Well, if the pallet is, I don't know, worth $1,000, maybe not. If the pallet's worth $50,000, which we've shipped $50,000 pallets because high value, I don't know, beauty products that are small and you get a whole pallet of them, that can be quite expensive. And $150 is almost negligible because a lot of units, a lot of value. But that fast check-in time may make sense. So for example, we have a truck coming Monday. We're trying to fill that as much as possible. And that'll go out Monday, check in Monday. And the shipping rates are actually going to be cheaper than partner carrier because we can apply the economies of scale to that. A couple other areas would be, okay, what equipment, what processes can they prep faster because they have better software, better processes, better systems? Hey, I have a tape gun at home, but maybe this prep center has, or 3PL has an automatic tape dispenser. Doesn't seem like much, but what if you're boxing up, I don't know, 1,000 boxes? Well, a couple seconds here and there really add up. A couple other things to think about is saying, hey, I've got a guy who's actually a client of mine, and he has his own warehouse that is completely capable of doing everything that I do.
Yeah.
The key thing is, he is on the East Coast, and I'm more central. So his suppliers, for example, if he has a supplier in California, then it's actually cheaper for him to send it to me prep it and ship it to Amazon, and obviously charge prep rates, than it is for him to send it all the way to him and prep him himself. Because it's still going to cost him money to prep. Just because you get your own warehouse, it doesn't mean all the costs go away. It just means they go down a little bit. But I know large sellers, we're talking 8 and 9 figure sellers that have their own warehouse, and they still use 3PLs because logistical advantages. Another thing about locations is, okay, you got a warehouse in California, maybe it's more expensive over there. Maybe you bring your products more inland to the United States and say, wow, we not only are going to find probably cheaper prep rates and storage rates, but we're also going to encounter that we're going to a different Amazon warehouse. So we all know California warehouses are packed. It's just kind of like permanent at this point.
Do you know what? All this stuff, what you're saying is really good. But I think the biggest problem people are facing, depending on the size of the seller, is finding a good 3PL. And I'm not just talking about sellers complaining because they don't answer their emails in 3 minutes and stuff. It's a general problem that we've got.
This is
that there's not enough 3PLs to go. Not that there's not enough 3PLs to go around. My theory is that 3PLs have got to work into a margin. So they're better to work with the larger customers and deal with them than, say, the smaller customers because of the turnover. Right. And so there's times where I've seen it and people have been squeezed out in the 3PL is where they're not really doing enough. And then like their quality of service starts to drop, and then they start to look to move around, and they're facing the same problems as you go to these various different 3PLs. And it's even worse for the smaller sellers because the 3PLs do not want to touch them because there's not enough meat on the bone to bother working with them.
Yeah, so you are correct in a sense that, hey, it makes sense to, if I've got a client that wants to do 10,000 units of label only, probably going to be a lot easier than a client that's sending us 100 units a month. Yeah. But there are 3PLs and there are prep centers out there that kind of target those customers. One really big misconception is, okay, all 3PLs are like operationally the same. They receive products, they prep them, they ship them or store them or whatever. Really not. So there are 3PLs in California right now that run everything on paper, like physical notebook type paper.
Yeah.
And you want to get your inventory reconciled? Good luck. Yeah. There's also 3PLs that that are kind of in the middle ground, and that's kind of where we are right now. That we don't have a full-on proprietary system. We'll eventually get to that, but they have specialty niches and they are strong suits in certain areas. A friend of mine does almost exclusively case forwarding. He doesn't do a lot of prep. He doesn't do a lot of OA, but he's really good at case forwarding. The biggest thing that I would say people need to look at is, one, what is that prep center or 3PL specialty? Because there's a lot of warehouses out there right now that know warehousing. They're good at warehousing, but they don't really understand Amazon, or the vice versa. I've seen 3PLs and prep centers that, okay, we know Amazon, we got all the shipments up, but they lose stuff in their own warehouse because they don't have storage locations. They don't have good organization. They don't have, I would say, lean and efficient processes. And now your stuff's getting mixed up. Finding one, not going to lie, that understands the warehousing and logistics world, but also understands Amazon is personally, in my opinion, pretty rare. Now, I say that not as a 3PL, but as someone who's used over, I don't know, I think 7 or 8 facilities myself. And I usually get one or the other. And I've had ones that kind of understand both. But at the same time, we designed our process to say, hey, what makes sense for us? We want to have good processes on our end. But what also makes sense for the client? I know a facility that says, hey, you got to enter it in our proprietary software. Okay, but the process of entering it into that is extremely labor intensive. So if you have 1 or 2 SKUs, no big deal. If you're constantly buying new SKUs or have a large catalog, it's extremely labor intensive. Well, then you ask yourself, okay, why can't that be changed to like an upload or something like that? Analytics and insights, not every facility is going to offer it, but it's always helpful. But I think finding and vetting a facility and asking them the questions that say, kind of, what makes you different? Because there's a lot out there, and I recognize that. But the problem is getting ones that kind of understand the full picture is quite hard. And saying, hey, we know how to put labels on boxes. Yeah, everyone does that. But do you know how to create a shipment? Do you know what to do about oversized versus standard? Well, we actually
James, sorry, your screen's going up and down. Is your you got a laptop on your lap there? Sorry, because I'm hearing a clicking sound every time you talk. The screen's going up and down and flapping. So I was just getting a bit seasick, but
yeah, sorry about that. Let me try to adjust.
There you go. Because obviously, when it plays back on the podcast, it's going to be click, 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 and driving the audience mad. Yeah,
is that better?
Perfect. There we go. Sorry for breaking up the flow. Go on.
No problem. So the thing when evaluating a 3PL is call them, see, hey, do they understand your business model? Wholesale is nothing new. Private label is nothing new, but that will help them service you better. So if you're sending in stuff and you need case forwarding or drip feed into FBA, that's going to be a slightly different process than a wholesale seller that's sending lots of SKUs and stuff like that. Yeah. And just kind of think about all those different variables at play. And then what other services do they offer? Do they do fulfillment? Do they do it well? I think that there's a lot of opportunity into this Q4. We're seeing it right now. It's saying, hey, you need to prepare your merchant fulfilled operations to see, does this make sense for my business? Because if it's anything like this past year, it's going to be an interesting Q4.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we go back into the rest of this, I'll share this into the groups. Let me just pull it up here. This is an interesting from Economic Times. Big shout out to Clement. He shared it in a private group. This is, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. So I'm just posting this into the chat here. I'm not sure. I'll put it in the private chat. Pull this up and have a look and see what you think. What he's talking about, I'll read out. Get ready for years of chaos in container shipping. Now, Raphael, and I think it was Raphael, if that's correct pronunciation. There's a check here. Yeah, Raphael from Unicargo on last week with Sharon Evan. They were talking about some of the problems that we face at the moment. And this article here is talking about literally years before it's going to start to subside. We'll just pull up some details here. I'll just quote a few of these bits here. The world's cargo ships just can't seem to get their act together. First, there was the queues of twin ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which left as many as 40 containers vessels awaiting the berth of early February among the flood of traffic, combined with volumes at the terminals hit a record of 1.9 million containers in May, nearly doubled the COVID-19 low of March 2020. Then there was when it got stuck in the canal, delaying hundreds of ships on their way between Asia. We know all this kind of stuff. Let me just pull up some more information. If you think it's mostly a bit of a local bother, then will smooth out itself as dislocations of reawakening global economy ease off. You might be in for a shock. The factors that driven Asia-Europe container rates to the record levels of 10,000 per 40 foot box aren't simply a temporary coordination problem. Returning to semblance of normality could take years. The container shipping industry is usually such well-oiled machine that we barely notice it. Vessels carrying 10,000 containers can arrive at dawn and depart with new cargo by sunset. Rates have times drifted so low that in 2016 you could shift a metric ton of goods from Shanghai to Rotterdam for about $10. And even then, the world's biggest shipping line, AP Moller, was able to turn a modest operating profit on that. Box of rebellion. Part of the problem has been that the containers aren't in the right places. In global terms, trade enjoy a remarkable short and sharp pandemic. By September last year, volumes were already running ahead of the seasonally adjusted levels in January and February, as demand for medical equipment and spending on durable goods picked up in rich countries. Trying to make all these deliveries on time meant that many vessels started making their return journeys empty, saving a few precious hours that would normally be spent picking up vacant boxes to ship back to China. That's the result of a glut of containers in Europe and North American ports and a shortage of Asia, pushing freight rates to an astronomical levels on export routes. I won't keep reading out because people can read for themselves, but I think it's really important to get a bit more of a backstory of what is happening now. But from your perspective, obviously dealing with this as well, what's your take on all this?
So containers, obviously, everyone knows that shipping in general, not just containers, is going up. There's a very unique phenomenon called the bullwhip effect.
Yes.
And if you don't know about it, go read about it. It is incredibly applicable to our industry.
Do you want to give them the audience a quick overview, save them Googling?
Yeah, so obviously encourage you to go read into it, but basically what it means is when something big happens to an industry, i.e. COVID for us, there is a kind of a drop and then an overcorrection saying, hey, we kind of all stopped last year and saying, hey, what's going on? A lot of things slowed down. We couldn't do a lot of things. And then to balance it out, we say, oh, snap, we need to overcorrect and buy 5 containers instead of normally buying 2. Well, imagine all the companies doing that. Imagine the silicon chip manufacturers where they basically slowed down to almost a
Well,
stop.
there's a comment here, like you said, Home Depot purchased their own ship to cover their own asses here.
Yep, they purchased their own ship and said, hey, we can't fix this, so we have to take care of the ship itself, which, by the way, is expensive. But I think one of the biggest parts of this is the fact that you are correct in reading that I don't think this is going away, because for it to balance out takes a lot more than just, hey, you overcorrected. Well, now you have to overcorrect. You got to let it level out. That's going to take a long time. We're seeing that across the board, across all industries, but you're also going to see it on the cost of goods too. So lumber's high right now. It's going down, but it's not going to affect actual prices for a little bit in the stores. And then, hey, it's got to balance out too. Well, now I'll apply that to every commodity, every product, every shipping service. It takes a lot to iron out an unusual spike or decrease in demand.
And panic drives it as well, doesn't it? Because people you get into the stage, especially if they're not on top of their numbers, they're doing all this stuff at break even. They want to retain rank and stuff. And literally for the next year or so, for 6 months to 8 months of those years, they're going to be looking at working on a break even just to keep the machine moving along, so that it retains what they've got. But it's not going to be a very profitable for them, especially if they've been working on tight margins. I know it's had impact on some of our clients and some people that I know as well, is if they've been on wafer thin margins, it becomes very difficult with these shipping rates now, because they're astronomical. They're not even close to being just going up. They're astronomical. Some people just can't meet the margin on them.
A great example of the bullwhip effect that almost every one of your listeners will be able to relate to is the fact that restock limits exist right now. If we would have been steady all through COVID and all through now, we probably wouldn't see that, because they could grow at a consistent rate. But the roller coaster that was last year, COVID hits, then huge spike in demand for certain products, and then Q4 hits, and all of these other variables, they had a bullwhip effect, but they couldn't keep up. Amazon. So now you have people sending, I want to send in 2 containers because I keep running out of stock. Well, Amazon's only going to let them send in half or whatever. That goes for pallets, that goes for parcels, etc. The bullwhip effect affects everyone, even those that are not importing and exporting.
Yeah, good comment here. I'm not sure. Facebook user, make yourself known. I think if you click on the StreamYard link, you'll be able to pop up. But good point here. Safety stock is unknown principle that sellers forget long ago. Backup plans, covering your butt is important, but don't forget retailers retain the right to cancel orders that are delayed. So that's really a tough one as well, because people that are having contracts like that with retail, you puts you right under the hammer.
Well, I think safety stock is going to be a big wake-up call, not just for private label sellers, which kind of already knew a little bit about it, but also wholesale, where most people were buying based on what they could sell and what they needed. Well, now you may have to store inventory because you won't be able to restock for 3 months, or you want to have a little bit larger buffer. And that goes into Q4 too, and saying, hey, if you can't get it into FBA, your quote safety stock might be within your warehouse or your 3PL to do merchant fulfill.
Cool. Sorry, we went off track a little bit there. I'll read Side B's comment and then we'll get back onto your notes here. Businesses and AM seller need to accept that we are in this shipping hole for years. Start building this into a selling price. Yeah, but that's good. But we need everyone to build into the selling price because you know that people are still going to gut the market on price. So it's going to be very difficult, and that's where the adjustments will come to, because you can include it in, but then suddenly you're non-competitive. Your conversion rate goes down on your PPC on those certain keywords that you're targeting. So it's going to be a bit of a free-for-all, and we'll see where it goes. But a good point there, Si. Back to you, James. Yeah.
In addition to that point is we're going to be probably seeing how Amazon sellers or e-commerce sellers design their supply chain. They're saying, hey, it's all on Amazon now. It's just there. You can't do that anymore. No matter what type of seller you are, you kind of have to have alternatives and backups. The last area I wanted to touch on, and we may do, I may talk to you about doing something kind of special around this and bringing in another guest, but the fulfillment side of things. It's kind of a big wake-up call for some people, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, is saying, hey, Amazon FBA is cheap to fulfill. But guess what? If you don't have any stock at FBA because of restock limits, because of logistical delays, etc., I would rather sell something for more money than not have any stock at all. So think about merchant fulfilled, but also be aware that, okay, you're going to have to pay shipping, which is probably pretty close to what the FBA fees are already. Then you're going to have to pay, whether it's your own employees in your own warehouse, your kids, your friends, etc., or a 3PL, for pick and pack. And that's the packaging and processing, all that applies to that. This is a big concern for some people because it's like, wow, like $6 to ship a package because of $3 shipping and $3 pick and pack. That seems like a lot of money compared to FBA. But you can't replicate FBA. No one has anywhere near their capacity or infrastructure. With that said, you can get obviously volume discounts, but just be aware on the fulfillment side of things, that if you're going to work with either a 3PL or doing it yourself, start to learn now so that in Q4, if you're doing it yourself, I still want you to be aware of the shipping rates. USPS versus UPS, UPS versus FedEx. If you have access to additional carriers, then great. And then there's also other fulfillment networks, whether you're using a 3PL that has a significant central location or multiple locations. There's some other companies out there that will kind of distribute it for you and kind of integrate with other marketplaces. There's a lot of options out there, but one, read the reviews, understand their pricing. There's a lot of 3PLs that will line item everything. We're talking tape. They'll line item tape. They'll line item a shipping label. Like not the actual shipping cost, but the actual label itself. Like you can also go to the one extreme of line item everything. You can go to the other extreme of, hey, they have very, very simple rates. For the most part, most everyone will fall in the middle because it's very, very hard to do a flat rate for everything. Because hey, a vacuum is going to ship much different than a small beauty item. But ultimately, think about the different variables in pricing and understand the full picture before you dive in and say, oh, I'm going to send 10,000 units and be like, oh, snap, it's double the price I thought it was going to cost.
Yeah, I think people are also getting caught out in the shipping where they're getting their quotes and it's just a moving target all the time. So by the time they're at the beginning of the cycle, getting everything ready and get the order processed, suddenly the shipping's just gone through the roof and they're stuck really because they've not been monitoring from the day one to the 90 days. Let's just say it takes 90 days to get a product with samples turned around with the factory. By the time you queued up, manufactured the goods and everything, and suddenly your shipping's just taken off. So yeah, it's stuff to keep an eye on. Is there anything else that we've missed?
One last point, and this is much more towards private label sellers. Not to say that wholesale sellers couldn't leverage it, but this is probably one of the biggest ways, and I'll probably get some flack for this, but adjust your case sizes and adjust your product sizes. Your product size, maybe you can cut off a half an inch or an ounce or whatever. Now you're into a cheaper fee bracket. The other thing you can think about is if you make your case sizes smaller or bigger or a certain size, now you may be able to do the drip feeding even easier. If you've got 200 to a case, that's a lot of inventory. What if you cut that down to 100 or 50, and now you send in 50 at a time? A lot of 3PLs out there will charge for fulfilling a case differently than individual products because they don't have to count each product. Well, if you have 200, it's going to be a lot more inventory and a lot less flexibility than if you have 50 per case. Now, will that change your shipping cost? Maybe a little bit, more handling units, etc. But it is something to think about whether changing your product or case size can save you a massive amount of money in other areas that you don't even think about, like holding cost and storage and stuff like that.
Yeah, we done that a few years ago. We don't sell them now, but before Helium 10 went mental with the neck pillows, we were one of the first to market about 2015 or so. One of the things that we did with the neck pillow, because it was memory foam, we was able to get it and fold it over and then put it into a bag, and it almost cut 40% of the sizing down, so it reduced a lot of costs overall. It reduced our sea shipping costs. We got more in the pallet, and obviously adjustments were made at Amazon when we're sending in the stock as well. So just things like that, because memory foam can spring back into place. We tested it a number of different ways, and we just found that if you make it tube-like and then fold it over, and then when we took it out the bag, it expanded. We made sure we'd done a series of tests, but that was a little breakthrough that we had on that product to make it more profitable at the time. Obviously, we've got out that product now completely because it's you'd be a lunatic to sell them. What else is going on?
I don't have a whole lot of other notes. I can go talk about this for hours type thing, but ultimately, I think in summary, is recognize opportunity cost, because it is the number one overlooked expense, even though it's not on your books and your P&L. But opportunity cost, where you're spending your time, where you're spending your money. Are we doing something slower to save a few pennies, but now the labor is costing us? Understand your supply chain, either redesign it, reevaluate it, etc., all the way through. Even if you're wholesale, I think you should think about what your manufacturers are looking like right now, because you may not be able to buy your product. Wholesale, private label, understand your supply chain. And then what shipping and logistics improvements can you make, whether it's working with a 3PL, whether it's with your own warehouse, shortening the time to get to Amazon? Can you book your own freight? Can you work with kind of supply chain experts to say, hey, what areas can we save money on? What areas can we either automate or speed up? And a lot of this is going to be coming down to your own business. There's probably going to be areas that you don't think about, but at the same time, consider all your options, because even me right now, there are certain situations that I have my own warehouse. I have complete capacity to prep my own stuff. But if I buy something from Maine, it's going to cost me a lot of money to ship it to me. So maybe I can form a relationship with someone that's in the Northeast area, and maybe they can prep it. It's not going to change a whole lot on my process, but I don't think that you should limit yourself to kind of we do this one way. Think about alternative plans that may kind of be out in left field and may not make sense initially, but do the actual numbers, do the pricing, and all the factors put into play, and your time. Your time is valuable, and people undervalue their time all the time in this industry. Yeah,
it's like you buy a car. It doesn't mean you want to be the mechanic that's going to do all the repair work or the service, right? You don't want to get under the car and get covered in shit. So why would you want to drag boxes around the warehouse when you're good at product development, for instance?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. James, what's the best way that people can reach you?
Absolutely. So I've got our website, marketplaceprep.com. You can also reach out to me personally. I'm James Universe on most platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, James Universe or James McConnell Jr., and happy to help out where I can, and let me know if anyone has any other questions.
Great. Guys, I'll be back here tomorrow. We'll have Paul Rafelson coming in. We're going to actually he's reviewed the antitrust laws, and in order for Amazon to kind of keep it in one piece, he's used the words game changer, which I think is kind of overused in our industry. Amazon will shut down marketplaces. We know it. We will be all vendors. PPC will be done. It sounds like the skies are falling. It won't be. But I do like Paul. We need to go through all of this stuff tomorrow. It's going to be kind of interesting. He's just kind of reviewing looking the antitrust, looking at how the laws are played out and what Amazon would need to do in order to make it work on every level. So it's going to be quite interesting to break that down and see if there's anything there that we can predict for the future. James, again, thank you for joining us today. Guys, I'll see you back here again tomorrow. Much love. Take care of your family, and I'll see you again then.